Look at how to create mist in an image to give more atmosphere. So what I have here are 6 images taken inside the old church ruin in Somerton. It was obviously too wide for the lens that I had to do it in one image, so I have created 6 which go sort of 170, 180 degrees, and I want to stitch those together into a panorama. So I've done this in Lightroom because when you stitch images together in Lightroom, you get a stitched together image which you can still adjust with the raw converter, which is obviously what Lightroom is. So all I need to do to stitch these together is click on one image and then click on the other image to highlight them all, and go to Photo and Photo Merge Panorama. And you need cylindrical projection selected, as this works best for straight panoramas. This just takes a few seconds to do the preview. Talk amongst yourselves. It was a fairly wet and rainy day when I took these pictures, but there wasn't mist around, which is something that I really wanted. It is kind of hit and miss as to whether you can find a day which is actually misty, so this is a sort of effect which can create a degree of that effect. Okay, so when you stitch the pictures together, you get this obviously quite bouncy edged image. But to sort that out, you can just slide this slider, which is called boundary warp, and it fills in the edges and evens everything up. Now, if I were to merge this, I would click merge, but I've already done that. So to save a few minutes, which it would inevitably take, I'm just going to cancel that. And here's one I made earlier. So there is the finished stitch. So I just need to make a few adjustments to this in Lightroom. So I want to bring down the highlights a little bit because they are quite glary. And I'd like to turn up the shadows a little bit just to make the whole building slightly more outstanding. And maybe just lower the black slightly for a little bit of extra contrast in the deep shadows. Okay, something like that will be okay, I think. So the mist effect relies on having another layer which you can adapt to look. So you can add an effect on the other layer, and then you can use a layer mask to incorporate the two effects together. So to do that, I need to go into Photoshop. So to open this picture in Photoshop, I go to Photo again and edit in Photoshop. So I'll click on that, and this will again just take a few seconds for it to work its way across into the other piece of software. Really do need to learn video editing, which would perhaps do away with these gaps whilst the computer's whirring. It's taking its time because this is a large file made up of six full frame files. I think it ends up at, can't remember, it's well over a gigabyte, I think. Okay, here we are. So the first step I need to do is to create a copy background layer. So if I go to Layer and Duplicate Layer, click OK for background copy. There's a shortcut to doing that, which is just Control or Command J on your keyboard, and you get a background copy. So what I want to do to this background copy is add a negative dehaze. So to get to the dehaze filter, I need to go to Filter on Photoshop and click Camera Raw Filter. And then down here near the bottom we have dehaze. So if I slide that all the way to -100, you can see you get quite a misty, murky looking foggy effect, which is what I want in this picture. So I'm going to click OK. My background copy has now got a very, very misty effect on it, which is quite nice in itself, but it looks more convincing if you limit the fog to sort of the middle distance. So if I create a layer mask on my background copy and I invert that layer mask by going Command or Control I, so it changes colour, I can then use my layer mask to paint through and bring back clear areas of the background that I want to paint through to create, paint through to see the misty areas that are on my background copy as I've inverted it. So I need my brush tool, which is up here, and I also need my foreground colour on my colour swatch to be white, and then adjust the size of my brush and have the opacity on about 50% so that you can sort of add the mist in degrees, and just paint into the holes or into the middle distance depending on what sort of picture you have, and create the mist. So because I'm on 50%, I can go over it a couple of times to create a mistier effect, and that builds up the sort of fog in the background. I'm going to do a little bit up here in the canopy as well, because I think that would look a little bit more convincing if it was creeping down. Often fog is quite low lying, so I'd like to look as though it's sort of creeping down from the skies. You might need to alter the size of your brush a few times to fill in areas that are quite small. Just to be a little bit patient going round things. And over here in the big hole again, we can have a bigger brush and paint in the mist on this side, which just kind of looks like the whole thing is getting some mist in from the sea. If you get a bit too close to the building, which I think I have here, all you need to do is change your foreground colour from white to black, and you can just trim the edges away again, and it paints back what you have just gone over. It's a simple job to just touch up any errors, and back to white, and paint in some of the mist again. Actually, I think it might look better if that little bit of ivy there is darker, because that's quite close to the camera, as is that one. So it's a bit of trial and error to get it looking convincing. I think that looks better, because then the mist looks like it's in the background. Here at the back of the church, or the front of the church, whichever way you look at it, I want to add a little bit of mist, but not as much as in the other areas. So I'm just going to paint over it once. Sorry, on the wrong colour again, with white. Just want to paint over it once so I get some mist, but not the whole 100%. I need to do the distance through the archway here as well. So I'll do that a couple of times to build that up. And even with a tinier brush just down there, it helps to zoom in sometimes. So if you zoom into the different pixels. Okay, you get the idea. So I think what I'm going to do to finish it off is I'm going to just perhaps add a levels adjustment layer, and just maybe just bring in a little bit more contrast by tweaking those edges up. See how that looks? Yeah, that just adds a little bit more contrast. So you can see if I turn on and off the background copy layer, it really shows you where the mist has ended up in our image. Yeah, so a little bit of practice needed to get the edges looking reasonable. I mean, when it's something like this, and when it's misty, it's not hypercritical, especially when it's kind of small on the screen. But if you were to, you know, do this on a big print, you probably would have to be a little bit more critical about where your mist touches the edges of the building, and make sure to tidy all these areas up so that you don't have mist creeping onto the stonework where it's not wanted. But overall, it's a fairly convincing way of getting some atmosphere and fog into your pictures.